Hello and welcome to Stephen University. This week we are of course discussing Buddy's book. Now, if those of you wondering, last week we left on the cliffhanger. We'd seen 2 episodes in a row that had not blown Chris away, let's say. Maybe the opposite of that. And there was a looming threat of that becoming a trend, which Chris was concerned about. So we're about to find out.
Well, it was because I can criticize the episodes, but if this one made me grumpy, I have to look inward, Dan, and I have to say, is it me? You know?
Gotcha. I understand.
Am I just in a bad mood?
Maybe. Well, let's find out. Chris, what was Buddy's book about, and how did you feel about it?
So this episode, Connie and Stephen are riding Lion. They get to the library. Stephen's never seen a library, but he loves a good book, so he's all excited. Mm-hmm. Connie starts revising while Stephen goes exploring. Mm-hmm. Stephen finds Buddy's book, which is one of the founders of the... I can't really remember. They do helpfully remind us, but it's the guy the Postman played in the play. He founded and discovered the beach city with the mayor.
So he was basically the guy that went with him on this journey and documented that stuff.
So Buddy finds a field with loads of strawberries, then he sees the crystal gems, and he decides to make his mark that he's going to go and visit all the places on a map they've got, because Stephen has previously discovered in the book that he'd drawn loads of gem locations. Buddy goes exploring, sees all these places, and then including along the way the kindergarten where he meets Amethyst, etc. And then eventually he kind of begins to get a bit upset and kind of points out to Amethyst that people have seen these places before. Actually, he's just a tourist. And she says, well, there's this one place that nobody's seen. So it's the sandcastle. So he goes trying to find that, passes out. Rose and a harem of what looks like kind of lion looks like a kind of gemified lion, but these look like real lions. One of them looks very close to the female from The Lion King, whose name I can't remember. But maybe that's just how female lions look. Maybe that's my lack of lion knowledge.
Lion knowledge. I assume you're referring to Nala.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know. The female
That's the
one.
female lion from The Lion King.
Yeah, no, don't disbelieve you. I'm just saying, it's not like you went Nala and I went, that's the one. I don't know.
I see. Yeah, I did want a moment of... Because I think I said it twice, and I couldn't decide if the first time you'd heard me and you didn't care enough to say anything, you were just like, yeah, okay, I guess, whatever. Or if it was that you didn't hear me. So I repeated it a second time on the off chance you just hadn't heard me, and I got the exact same reaction. I was like, okay, I guess he just doesn't give a shit.
No, I just don't. Yeah, no, I like The Lion King, but anyway.
It's a good movie, but it wasn't a part of your childhood, was it, Chris? Because, of course, animation makes your heart grow oh so cold.
Yeah. I watched it. I've seen it twice. Once in university, my friend Sophie made me watch it, and once after university when my friend Ronnie made us watch it.
Well, there you go.
So he explains to Rose that he feels like a tourist. She says, "But no, you documented it. That's awesome. People get more detail because of you." He's like, "Oh yeah, cool." He's happier. She's cheered him up. And then he decides. She says, "Have you ever thought about becoming an author?" And he decides to become an author, and that's why the library is named after him. And then what's the name of the postman? Jamie. We see a picture of Buddy and realise he doesn't look like Jamie, as Stephen's been imagining him. So they decide to change the picture in their minds to Jamie. And there's a little wink and a nod, and that's the end of the episode, Dan.
Mm-hmm. Now, how did we feel about it? More importantly,
meh. No, I'm joking. I liked this one a lot more than the last few.
Cool.
I enjoyed the flashbacks. I enjoyed the story. I think this was the right kind of. I think last week, sardonics and the Late Show kind of thing. It kind of felt like it kind of felt like it was there for the fans, but I was just a bit like, okay. Whereas this felt like it was there for the fans. Like, you see Rose, you see Steven's interpretations of what earlier versions of the gems would look like. It's all very, we gradually see, we see Pearl and Garnet, then we see Amethyst, and, it's leading up to Rose because you realise she's alive in this timeline that they're talking about. But it felt more... I'd connected with it more. It felt more serviceable to me. I think because, I guess maybe because we were getting a story. I didn't know where it was going, which is a big thing discussed last week. So I think maybe for all those reasons, I just connected with it more. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Equally, I can see someone potentially not liking it. I know that there are people out there that, because it wasn't a flashback that dealt with gem stuff. It was a flashback where we got a few nice things. Obviously, Rose with 7 real lines is interesting, but I can see some people being like, well, it didn't really serve much of a purpose. I can see that, but not for me. I quite enjoyed it, especially compared to the last two. Although I didn't mind we sort of swapped roles. I didn't mind Kindergarten Kid as much as you, and you didn't mind last
Fusion.
week's Know Your Fusion as much as I did. So where do you stand on this one?
Yeah, I think this is another one that's kind of frustrating for me. It's another one that's like in the middle, because again, I find myself going like, which boxes does this one tick? And not many of them is sadly the answer. But there is a lot to like about it. I think Stephen and Connie together is always adorable. Love that they've just continued this idea that since Stephen's grounding from television, his love of books has just grown and grown and grown to the point now where I'm pretty sure they've, ungrounded him from TV, but he's still like that love has stuck around. I think that's just really neat to have a character that, like, especially for a kids show, it's a nice little message.
It's neat, but it did take me a minute to remember it. I was like, does he love books? I thought he loved TV. Oh, he got grounded from TV. Oh, that makes sense.
And then there was a whole series of episodes where it was like almost like a whole season where they just kept referencing different books he was reading, and Connie lending him books, and a bunch of different stuff about relating to reading. And it's been a little bit less referenced recently, but that's still really cool. So yeah, I think that it's and there's a load of really cool stuff about the locations. So this episode reveals that the location of the Pyramid Temple and the Gem Battlefield somewhere in a real world context to be in the region of Scandinavia, in the Scandinavian sort of peninsula, which is nice to have some context for where these things are, because some of the other locations you could make guesses. Like we've said, that other kindergarten looks like a Grand Canyon-y sort of potential area. We've talked in the past about the Great North feeling like Canada.
Well, here's my question on that, Dan. Sorry to interrupt. Is it nice? Because one element of this episode that I was like unsure of my feelings on was that they've set up through the Empire City episode that this is a filled world. There are people in this world. Not just the people of Beach City. We've had TV shows. We've had Empire City. It's a world where there's people roaming. I watching this kind of felt a bit like I kind of like the locations. I didn't know where they were, but they felt inaccessible to humans. Now that we know they are accessible to humans, especially a human of that time where, travel, there weren't cars and stuff, which there is in this world of Steven Universe. Again, it's the rules, discussed it last week, it's the rules the universe creates. These people have cars, they will travel. So are you not a little bit going now, well, why haven't... Because if it was, this world... These areas would have been investigated. They would have been taken over by man. They would be tourist attractions. That's not happened in the show. And do you think by doing this episode, it raises the question of why that's not happened?
No, because if you track where they all are, none of them appear to be from Jamie's map in populated areas, number one. Buddy's map. None of them appear to be in populated areas. And two, his book ended up underneath the bottom shelf in a library, which means no one ever really paid too much attention to it anyway. And also, just because explorers can get to areas doesn't mean they're still easy to accept. You know, that you can climb Kilimanjaro. You know, you can climb Mount Everest if you really want. Most people don't, because it's not a very hospitable environment. Deserts aren't hospitable. Mountaintops aren't hospitable. You know, yes, you're able to get to them if someone points to an exact spot on a map and says they're here. Yeah, you can reach it, but it will be a lot of work. Like it's, you know, these are all still quite inaccessible. I mean, think about the desert one. How long it takes him to find it? Like he nearly dies out in the desert searching for that thing until Rose finds him. So I think the episode doesn't spoil that for me, because clearly they are nowhere near the areas on a map that humanity would build up things, because humans tend to find flat land with medium or mild weather conditions, nothing too extreme cold or hot. So no deserts, no snowy mountaintops, where we have a decent water source and mild enough weather to do agriculture. All of the gem places we've seen have either been pretty much in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of a desert, or on top of a mountain. And that's just not where people tend to live. So
makes a lot of sense. That was a very well argued point.
Wow.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, you could imagine one or two of these becoming like, if discovered soon enough or at a certain point, you could foresee a version of this where there's a gem monument they try to visit in a later episode that has been turned into sort of a Stonehenge. That is it's actually a kind of neat idea, like, that you've stumbled across.
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting. But then
Yeah.
does it play with does it again go too near that line I'm talking about, maybe?
Well, the idea that maybe
think,
one of them has been found isn't too out of the realms, because as my point sort of states, they're not inaccessible. They're just a little they're out of the way enough to probably have stayed hidden for a while. But just because they haven't been discovered doesn't mean they couldn't be, I suppose. So you could go back down that argument of, well, this is the one that was statistically, one of them was bound to get found eventually. They're not exactly, you know, Wakanda, you know, under a big metal sort of reflective sheet that makes it look like it's not really there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair.
But as an overall point for the episode, then, to just sort of sum up my overall thoughts. So on the whole, I like it, and I think what I like about it is that it just gives some context to the world, because when you're traveling via warp, this is going to sound like a really weird comparison, but sometimes when you're traveling through London via the tube, you're going down under the ground, you're coming up out of the underground, and there's a thing that's iconic in London. So you could be at, I don't know, the London Eye, go down into a tube, come out near Big Ben or whatever, or go back in and come out of Piccadilly Circus, or any of the sort of more iconic areas of London, right? And you've no sense of their proximity to each other. But if you actually just walk around London, you can get to a lot of these really iconic things with like 10, 15 minutes walk in different directions. And when you see them laid out that way, they just feel more tangible. And in this show, they've always gone to these places via warp pad. So to get a sense of real-world locations, they feel less like they're in their own pocket universes and more like they actually are on the face of the planet we live on. And I know that seems weird, but to just really help drive that home by having them visited from a human's perspective, I think is kind of awesome. And there is something kind of, I got a weird sense of exploration out of it, even though these were all locations we visited before. Obviously the Sea Spire, which is where the cheeseburger backpack episode takes place. The Pyramid, which is where the episode Serious Stephen takes place. These are all things we visited. I mean, that Sea Spire doesn't even exist anymore, if you remember rightly, because of course the Sea Spire, they tried to take the moon, got a statue to stop it from collapsing. And it wasn't in Stephen's backpack, so it collapsed, and then his little dinghy popped back up, if you remember. A lot of these locations don't even properly exist anymore. But like thinking back, like it's cool to tie them all in one episode, and sort of it reaffirms the world as being a little bit more. So yeah, the communication hub, which we've seen, the kindergarten, the desert version of the kindergarten, the Sea Spire, the Galaxy Warp, the Gem Battlefield, like. Yeah, really cool. And also,
so that's what you got from the episode.
There's that, and then there's the Rose of it all, which is another really cool element of it. Because, like it's hard to know exactly where this stands in the timeline, because it's after they founded Beach City, but we don't know how much longer after. So if you actually think it through, Rose has to be about, because we know Rose has been around till quite recently, because she was obviously there long enough to meet Greg. But when you're watching the episode the first time, unless you lay the whole timeline out in your head and go, well, she has to have stayed to meet Greg, so of course Rose is still around. You sort of wonder, is this still in the Rose is around period? So when she shows up, it's almost a surprise, even though it totally shouldn't be. And that's just a weird trick of like perception, and like when you know laying it out in this way without an actual calendar in front of you. And the Lions thing, which is super interesting. So basically, what this episode is to me is a series of entertaining scenes that have so much interesting content in them that while it doesn't necessarily tick the character box, it does tick the Stephen and Connie being cute box, which is always good, and it also ticks the really interesting hints about the show's mythology box. Is that enough to make it on par with some of the recent really good episodes? No.
No, of course not.
But
no.
It's certainly enough for me to watch it for 11 minutes and go, cool, I enjoyed that. Do you know what I mean? I think that's where I stand.
It's comparable to, do you remember after the barn stuff, we had a succession of pretty good town episodes. Like the episode which flashed back to Onion and Sour Cream's mum and like her friendship with Amethyst and stuff like that. Yeah, it's comparable to one of those episodes. It's maybe not as strong, but it's a good episode. I think it from our point of view, like it's just. It's just quite. I think we're almost potentially, giving it too much credit because it just happens to be better than the last two we've watched. And Dan was grumpy, then I was grumpy, and this is a bit like, oh, okay, cool, pressure's off. This is, we're not going to be sat here moaning.
We both enjoyed this one rather than only one of us enjoying it.
Yeah, and it's better than. But like I say, even you've got your complaints with it, and even I said I can see why someone wouldn't like this episode because, and you've summed it up well. I'd phrased it because it doesn't. It's flashbacks, but it doesn't tell you a lot, and it's not very gemmy. But I think you summed it up better when you say it's a flashbacks, but it's a collection of scenes that, if you dig deeper, probably have some context. As opposed to being an all-out, here's the information. Mm-hmm. But I think it does enough and is better than the last two episodes, which from our point of view we're viewing really as season 4. This is the best season 4 episode so far. Yeah, and I like it anytime we see Stephen and Connie together. I think.
That's almost enough for it to be like an innocent, like sort of 11 minutes. Great, I didn't waste my time with that. Yes. I got more entertainment value out of it because that's the other thing we talked about, or I talked about at least when we talked about what was that first episode called again? The Roadrunner one. Dear Lord, I keep forgetting that's title.
Kindergarten Kid.
Yeah, thank you. Was that for me? It didn't even tick the entertainment box that well because I just thought it could have done a lot better at that. But this, at least, I found entertaining as well as interesting. And while it doesn't have the depth or even the humor of some of the other episodes, it had enough to land in tick the box of entertaining. Then again, I thought last week's did as well. So I suppose that's where we differ. But I do think it's a good episode. Is there anything that you picked up on then that you think is clearly a hint to something and you want to try and work through it now and have a quick chat? Because there's a few things in here that I'm wondering what you picked up on as being hints to other stuff.
Well, I was going to say, but the big one for me was the Lions. I was going to say, what did you think at the time the Lions were? Because I haven't really got a guess, but I just thought it was interesting that she didn't have Lion with her. She had 7 real Earth lions.
And even more interesting than that is that, well, not even more interesting, but one of the more interesting, I keep saying more, one of the other interesting elements of that is that that's at the pyramid, the where the sand should reshape stuff, which is exactly where I believe Stephen found Lion.
Okay. Yeah, I've no idea. I can't begin to guess that, though. But that was certainly the tantalizing, the hints, the of it all was very much.
There's
that
a really
for me.
neat visual detail in there that's a big clue, but you've not picked up on it, and I'm not going to point it out if that makes sense.
Okay.
But if and when we get to more information later on, I'll talk about that.
What did you notice at the time? If you can,
I did not notice that at the time. No. The visual detail.
But what was?
Oh, what was my thoughts on it? I honestly,
Yeah.
like you, I was kind of lost. I was just like, well, she's got a thing for lions. So I don't know. Maybe I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I was like, did she make a gem lion because she liked lions so much, like in general? So she just like thought a gem one would be a cool thing to have, like, or not gem one, like some sort of weird gem crossbreed lion. I don't know. Like, yeah, I couldn't quite focus my thoughts in any way that would make sense or be a story worth telling, because that's what it is when you're trying to theorize about a show. The theories you really end up getting behind, or I do, when I hit on something that both fits in to the canon perfectly and could potentially lead to a really cool story.
Yeah.
And I at the time of this episode could not think of any explanation for either Lion as we know him or these lions, and how they relate to each other, and in what way they're related to Rose. No version of a sequence of events I made up in my head ticked, I think, maybe even either of those boxes. None of them seemed like interesting. None of them made interesting story elements to me, because when I'd come up with some explanation that sort of had a logic to it, I'd go, but why? Was that going to be interesting to explore? No, probably not. Or the ones that seemed interesting to explore didn't quite fit with the logic of the show. So yeah, it's a really tough one, the Lions.
I love the cleverness of it though, of the writing, where they had Stephen and Connie arrive on Lion, so they are putting Lion and that connection, in people's heads subtly. It's like. Well, I just got an example of a show that did a similar thing recently, and I love it when you can just spot clever writing, and you could make an argument that if you spot it, it's not clever, but I don't think most would. I assume you've seen the This Is Us finale.
Yes. Although because
there's a scene
spoilers for that, careful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Slight spoiler. Yeah. There's a scene where Randy and Kevin are in the car and they're eating ice cream, and Randy gets panicked and Kevin kind of goes, "Oh yeah, I know you love the car, you paid for it with cash." Da 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 da. And when that aired, when I saw that scene, I was a bit like, they've not really done the car thing before. Like, okay, well, but it fits, it's funny. Didn't think anything of it. Something happens later to the car. Yeah, something happens later to the car, and you're like, oh, that's so genius to get that line in an earlier scene
in a way that didn't draw too much attention to itself. Yeah.
Nope. Yeah, it was just an amusing. It's when you can feed the audience information, but disguise it as this is for the humor, or this is necessary. Like in this, they disguise it as they do, because they pop out. They disguise it as the library is clearly far enough away that they had to get Lion to take them there. Which, if you think about it, it's probably bollocks, because it's not that big a town. So they've never, they've not done that much before. But that's what they disguise it as.
Well,
so that
yeah,
when
but
you see Rose,
notice it was called the Budwick Public Library, so it may not reside in Beach City.
Beach City, fair enough.
It might be in like a nearby town.
Were there any other clues or anything that you did spot then? That you did have a theory on, or?
I noticed. So you may have picked up on it when they were flicking through the locations. There was a sort of chair with like legs all overgrown, and it was called. What did they have the name of it? The thing that he'd written under it. If I could find I just want to make sure I pronounce it right, so I want to have the word in front of me, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. The palanquin.
Yes, I did notice.
There was an image, some sort of ruined structure illustrated as the palanquin was in his journal, and they flick past it pretty quickly, but it is full center frame, which some of these images, or many of these images, weren't. If you look, or if you recall, from the episode The Answer, which was the flashback to how Ruby and Sapphire came to be, darn it, they had, if you remember rightly, Blue Diamond in that episode. or a sort of silhouetted version of Blue Diamond, who was in a sort of throne chair with a sort of marquee type, sort of gazebo type roof bit to it.
Right. Okay.
And that palanquin looks like a ruined version of that. So the
Oh, nice.
possible suggestion is that when the gems, when the diamonds and whoever Homeworld gems fled Earth, Blue Diamond abandoned the palanquin, potentially.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. That's cool. I noticed the image. I didn't connect what it was, but I remember distinctly that visual sticking out because, like you say, it was less.
Well,
less
my
disguised.
intrigue with the diamonds was abnormally high in this show from as soon as they were introduced. So I remember when the answer aired, and we were getting a sort of weird little hint at Blue Diamond through that sort of weird silhouette-y flashback way they do it, when and Stephen can't quite visualize it because he doesn't know what these gems look like. I thought that was pretty cool, and I remembered watching that multiple times, just that scene. And going back to that episode and checking that scene out a few times, just because of the looking for details about Blue Diamond, and trying to put that together. So I think it was more in my mind than most because of the fact that really, for whatever reason, just pure dumb luck sometimes with these things, isn't it? The things that your attention is drawn to, sometimes you get your attention drawn to stuff that turns out to be nothing, and sometimes you're lucky and you get your attention drawn to something that turns out to be something quite significant, and you can put together a really cool theory, such as putting together that Garnet and Ruby, and Garnet is Sapphire and Ruby ahead of time, as you did when you noticed that moment in the first Stevonnie episode.
Yeah.
So it's just sometimes just coincidence that your attention is drawn to that. But I found that a really cool little nod. Even if that's not necessarily a future story point, which it seems unlikely because that story seems to resolve itself when you sort of go, if that is Blue Diamonds, then yeah, of course it's abandoned. Homeworld abandoned the planet. And of course, it's overgrown. It's probably been there quite a while at the point in which, the town was discovered and stuff. So yeah,
maybe now even too overgrown to visit. I think it's like you say. This is what's so great about the show being so layered that you can pick up on random stuff and put pieces together like that. And sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong, but it certainly makes for an engaging show.
Some of the artwork in Buddy's journal is actually concept art that had been drawn for the show originally, and they included the concept art because it's a drawing of the thing by a human hand, and it just seemed to make sense to display some of the show's original concept art, particularly, I believe, the one of the Crystal Temple, which again, it still doesn't have a canon name, although in some documentation it's been listed as obsidian, which is a type of stone gem thing. And the popular theory is that obsidian is a fusion of our main three crystal gems and rose. That seems to be a popular theory. Although again, all not canon until otherwise confirmed in the show, Chris.
Yep, makes sense. You got any other triv? I'm guessing triv-wise, you got to be careful.
Yeah, because some of this stuff is stuff that's hinting at things we haven't been revealed yet, and some of it we have. So I'm just flicking through it kind of carefully. Let's see. Oh, apparently the outfit Amethyst is wearing in the kindergarten when she meets Buddy is an 1890s Imperial Japanese cavalry uniform. Why that is, I could not fucking tell you.
That is specific.
Yeah, apparently it's been really specifically designed on a Japanese cavalry uniform from the 1890s. Could not tell you why. For the life of me. I mean, except for that the era kind of matches. But why she would have that, God knows. Unless in her spare time, Amethyst just goes off to fight in random other wars. I could not tell you. To keep herself busy, I guess.
That's an interesting point. Whether the gems got involved in Earth's, to what extent the gems got involved with Earth's history.
Yeah, because that's the thing is because Rebecca Sugar has always said it's like it is like Earth. And its history has evolved very similarly to Earth, but it veered off path, in many ways because of the interference of the gems, either at the early stages during the Gem War and Rebellion, and then arguably, although we don't have any evidence of this at this stage, by the crystal gems' presence on Earth following that, because they were continuing to protect Earth from the various crystal, not crystal, gem corruptions, the monsters. Although that's my theory on that, I guess, which I could put together right now on this spot, is that maybe there was a monster in Japan, and Amethyst went to poof it.
Makes sense.
And ended up, because the Japanese army were trying to deal with it, gave him a hand. I'm really not sure. And liked the uniform or something.
That sounds very much like a Doctor Who episode.
It does. It does.
Right.
But you know what? I would absolutely, if they do a flashback episode to Amethyst's trip to Japan to take on a corrupted gem, I'm on board. Awesome. I would watch that episode.
The Earth having a history which veers off slightly, but is still being affected is absolutely the right way to do it. If anyone wants to see the wrong way to do it, check out Bright, where magic has not affected Earth's history at all.
Yeah, it's a terrible movie. Its biggest crime, though, is just being boring, to be honest with you. But anyway, as well as completely, anyway, it doesn't matter. We've reviewed that many times. The two cars beside Lion apparently resemble a 2006 Honda CRV on the left, and a 1997 Mazda MPV on the right. I didn't recognise either of them personally, but I didn't pay too much attention to it because, of course, it's just cars in a cartoon. You don't really look at them for that sort of detail, but apparently both based on real life cars. So there you go. That's kind of cool.
Nice. Fair play.
Let's have a look. The outfits the crystal gems are wearing, and why the crystal gems here, it means... I guess that would refer to all of them. They were first seen wearing those outfits in a painting in So Many Birthdays.
Oh, nice.
So in So Many Birthdays, Stephen finds a photo of them from that era, and the outfits match, except for Rose.
That's cool. That sort of makes the outfits canonical then, because for me, I was like, well, these are just Stephen's imagination in the way that it's not Jamie. Do these outfits count? But if there was a picture, that kind of makes them a bit more legit. That's a nice touch.
There's a picture of Rose. In fact, could you look at an image right now? I could send you the picture if you wanted to look at it.
Yeah, sure.
Right. I've got the picture here, so I'm going to quickly send it to you if you want to have a look. It's basically, it's an image of Rose, Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl on the boat, on our boat with some of the original settlers, I guess. And Garnet is punching a shark in the face. It's an amazing image, actually, now I look at it. But that was seen by Stephen, or gifted to Stephen, maybe, framed in So Many Birthdays. I don't know if you got it. Mm-hmm. It's cool, isn't it? And the outfits match. The only one who doesn't wear the outfit from this photo in this episode is Rose.
Yeah, it's a really funny... Sorry, I'm viewing the image away from the mic. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? So it's a nice little nod.
Yeah, I'd never noticed the detail of that image before, but it's a cool image to look at. I bet like fans must have prints of that image. that exists somewhere.
It would not surprise me at all. And so again, Amethyst wearing the army uniform. Rose wearing a very sort of like an explorer like scarf and like top with like a belt buckle thing on it. An outfit she obviously is not wearing in this episode, suggesting she has either since been poofed and reformed, or Stephen just imagined her in her sort of purest rosiest sort of form.
I like it's a bit fansplaining, but I like the explanation for that it's such a sensitive, deep subject, his mum, that he can only imagine her one way. It's not about the amusing detail of changing outfits. It's more of like, he's talking about my mum.
Yeah, I would agree with that. A couple of little tiny nods, which is one of them is the librarian at the beginning of the episode is reading Passions of Zanzor. If you remember the book that's appeared in Greg the Babysitter and Maximum Capacity, the book said Stephen should read when he's older, and then reappeared in Greg the Babysitter. There's a little reference back to Love Letters, the Jamie episode when they talk about Jamie's drama zone. And then the more interesting of these remaining... this is the last one, but this is probably one of the more interesting of the little tidbits. In Rose's scabbard, Pearl states that Rose never had a lion. Pearl states that Rose never had a lion. Obviously, in this episode, which she's shown to have many lions, but for whatever reason, she chose not to tell Pearl about them. That is either an inconsistency the writers need to address, or a very intentional decision. Which do you suspect?
I think that's got to be connected to our lion plot. I think.
Mm-hmm. So you think there's something going on there?
Keeping secrets.
That's very intentional.
I'm telling you, Rose is a bit dodge.
Yeah, Rose is a bit dodge. Cool. So there you go. The one last thing I want to talk about very quickly, Chris, because we haven't got much time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware. But after we did the bismuth episode, people pointed out that we didn't mention bismuth has previously appeared in the show in a weird way prior to her episode. So I sent you a clip before we recorded this, and it's a clip from the Lapis episode where she retells her sort of origin story. The episode is Same Old World. And in it, it's that same Steven Universe sort of flashbacky style where it's sort of the silhouettes of gems, but very clearly the gem scene poofing Lapis is, if not our bismuth, definitely a bismuth for sure.
Yeah, and she says that she references being captured by Homeworld, so that made me like, well, bismuth was a crystal gem, so is it bismuth or is it another bismuth? I would assume.
Or is it our bismuth prior to being turned around by Rose?
That's possible. Yeah, again, we don't know the time frames of this of it all, do we? So
yeah, because obviously that bismuth did start very much on Homeworld's side and was won over by Rose.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Like, great little nod, interesting. It would
cool
be...
that they had the design so obviously ready before it turned up many episodes later. Because what number is episode Same Old World? Because obviously bismuth introduced in episode 98. I wonder what. Let me just double check when Same Old World was in the run.
It does. While you're looking that up, I will say it very much makes me like, well, let's see bismuth again, because you just want to see bismuth meet Lapis.
Yes, absolutely. In case, if that is a thing, absolutely. 81st episode. So bismuth, they were well ready to introduce bismuth at least by episode 81. That's pretty cool, I thought.
I felt further apart than that.
Yeah, no, it's been it's been a while since that. Obviously, that Same Old World was the episode where they were trying to introduce, saying to Lapis, welcome back to Earth. We're gonna find you somewhere to live, and she tells that story. You know, the one where they first go to Empire, yeah.
Maybe because in the context of the clip, I just assumed it was earlier than that. I assumed it was Lapis's first appearance. But okay, cool.
Yeah, no, it's a more recent episode, but because when I think of that episode, Same Old World, I think of Steven and Lapis looking around for a place for her to live and visiting various locations. You forget.
Yeah, I say, I associate that way more with the Empire City stuff than the Lapis flashback.
Yeah, which is weird because I completely remember that Lapis flashback really strongly because it's a really strong retelling of it. But I guess that Lapis flashback, while I remember it, I must associate it with a more aged episode, if that makes sense. But
yeah, in seeing the clip in isolation, I literally assumed, oh, she must have told this story when she first, took all the water and all of that stuff. I assumed it was proper early Lapis, but.
The reference is still awesome, though. Getting bismuth in that
it's brilliant.
20 episodes prior
fantastic.
to being introduced is still really cool. So, yeah. There you go.
Cool.
I think that's everything. Oh, one other thing, actually. Someone asked us to touch on very quickly. I think there's a really clear reason why we didn't talk about this when we talked about bismuth. But someone said they were really surprised that we didn't talk about whether we thought bismuth was right or not to want to kill the diamonds. And I'll be honest with you, listener, and as interesting as that question is, I think the answer is fairly straightforward for me, and that's why it never really came up, because I sort of assumed the same was for Chris. No, I don't think she was right. I think stooping to the diamonds level would exactly be perpetuating the existing problem. They're resorting to cheap tactics and murder and are being flippant with life. To stoop to that level would be hypocritical if what they're doing is trying to preserve life on Earth. And I think
the show's aim is always, in the same way that Harry Potter's aim, really, what J.K. Rowling is doing is making us feel and agree with Harry. Even when even when he's proper emo and stuff in like Order of the Phoenix, you still know why he's being like that. You still get that, and you're still with him. And I think this show, you're always with Steven. So I think one of the reasons we probably didn't touch upon that is because that's so clearly Steven's view. I think you assume that's, you're in a way. I'm not sure the audience is meant to be questioning that. The audience is, for me, the point of it is for the audience to just automatically agree
know
with
that
Steven,
bismuth is wrong,
who is morally right as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because I've pulled up the original message. So it's from Eli oh God, I'm never going to pronounce that. It's Jeschke. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that. But Eli or Ellie? No, it'd be Eli because I have another L in it. Yeah, so Eli asked and said that specifically. Said, you never really get into whether bismuth was justified or not. I suppose phrasing it that way. I still say no because I think that undermines the point of what Rose was trying to achieve. But again, what's great about this show is while I think it's very automatically understood that what Bismuth did was wrong and too far, at the same time, you totally know how Bismuth ended up there. So you don't see Bismuth as a flat out bad guy in the sense of as being a villain or anything like that.
You don't agree with him, but agree with her, but you can see where she's coming from.
100%. So yeah, that's how we stood, and I think it felt so clear cut that that's how we felt about it. That's why it didn't really come up. It didn't feel discussion worthy. But when you said it, I did go, you know what? Actually, maybe we should bring that up. So
it's
a few little tidbits
discussion.
at the end, and not related to the episode we're talking about, Buddy's book, but we've come back to just so we cover it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that's the beauty. That's the beauty of this podcast. Sometimes is we get such great feedback. It's nice to be able to a few episodes down the line, come back to a comment that someone made and sort of address it and add to a previous episode.
And thank you guys for, as always, being engaged and asking questions like that.
And I want to apologise again. My work situation's insane. I'm not currently replying to comments, but I promise you I'm reading them, and they're incredible. And again, thank you guys so much for taking the time. And I really hope you don't stop because you're not getting replies. That'll bum me out. So please continue to send your really fascinating and interesting thoughts because I promise I'm reading them. I'm just not having the time to reply.
And again, said it before, but I'll hammer it home always. If Dan's too busy and we're not responding, respond and chat with each other,
Oh, yeah, and that happens for sure. I see that all the time now, and it's really cool that you guys talk to each other. But awesome. I am really sorry that I've not been able to do that quite so much at the moment. So there you go. Cool. That is everything for this episode then, with a few little bit of extra bismuth-related bits at the end. Would you like a hint for the next episode, Chris?
Oh, yeah, go on.
We haven't done that in a little while, and I don't want to make it a regular thing, but occasionally when I can think of a good hint, I'm going to give you one. How's that? So you're no longer allowed to ask for a hint, because if you're asking, that means I've not thought of a good one.
Not going to put up with you telling me what to do, so I may still ask for hints, but carry on.
Well, if you ask for hints, I'm just going to tell you where to stick it. But if I can think of one naturally,
that'll be entertaining in itself.
Yeah. But you see what I'm saying there? Because I just feel like if we do it when you ask, it's going to happen when I'm just going to have to, off the top of my head, be like, and I'm going to say something either that's too spoilery or not spoilery enough or whatever, or is wrong. So if I can think of a good one, I'll do it. The next episode's called Mindful Education, and it has one of my favourite songs from the show in it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Who's it sung by?
That would be a spoiler, Chris.
Okay, fair enough.
So yeah,
cool.
I'm very excited for you to see that for that reason alone, and obviously not hinting at the quality of the remainder of the episode. For all you know, mate, it's a full on sequel to Know Your Fusion that just has a really great song mixed in.
I think that would be an odd
actually no, it's
choice
a sequel to Say Uncle with a really great song.
I think it would be but that would make more sense than having an episode in between. Like if it was a sequel to Know Your Fusion, I would expect that to air immediately after Know Your Fusion.
Yeah, rather than what we got, which is Buddy's book is a direct sort of sequel to the Jamie episode where he did the play Historical Friction.
Yeah.
Because it sort of tells the story of Buddy almost exactly from the point in which we left him there, which is having discovered Beach City. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway, cool. So yeah, that's everything for this week. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll speak to you next time as we discuss mindful education.